Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head over to Russia once again, and we're going to have a look at a beer from another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. As I've told you previously, I've been very impressed with the quality of the beers that I've had from the Russian craft breweries thus far. My first encounter with Russian craft beer was maybe back in 2016 when Malmö Brewing Company here in Skåne in the south of Sweden hosted a Russian craft beer festival. There was lots of different breweries there actually, but over the last few years it seems to have only gotten better. But I really would recommend that you try some of these Russian beers if you get the chance. More and more of them are starting to get their name out there a little bit across the European continent, which is great, and long may that continue. For this review though, as I said, we're going to introduce another brewery that hasn't featured on the channel before. This is my very first time tasting one of their beers, and fingers crossed this is another good one. So for this review then, we are going to go to St. Petersburg, as the Russians would call it, and we're going to have a look at my first beer from Bakunin Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Fibonacci. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this one is a double IPA. I'm not sure exactly what kind of IPA this one is, if it's going to be more of a West Coaster or whether it will be more of a kind of New England type IPA, but it is supposed to be a very good beer actually. So I'm very curious to see how it turns out, and hopefully you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. This is yet another beer that I bought from Beer Dome down in the Netherlands. When I did my Brazilian beer order a couple of weeks ago, I saw they had a few Russian beers that I hadn't had before, and from breweries that I hadn't encountered before, so I thought it was a good opportunity to add a few Russian beers into the mix, and that was the reason that I picked up this one. I'm sure it was my friend Thomas from Thomas Open. Check out the link to his channel in the description below. I'm sure it was him that told me that Bakunin was one that I really needed to check out actually. I think Harry over at Blue Nose Beer Reviews has reviewed a couple of their beers as well actually. He's very interested in all the Russian beers as well. But definitely nice to have these guys on the channel for the first time, and as I said previously, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one. I think this one will be a very interesting introduction to Bakunin Brewing Company. But yeah, let's see how we get on with this one. Always nice to have some new Russian breweries for you here on the channel. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Bakunin Brewing Company. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Russian beers that I've reviewed for you. That is being added to fairly regularly these days, because we do get a fair selection of different things from Russia, from various different breweries: AF, Zagovor, Stam, White Labs, Black Cat, lots of different things. So you will see that list added to over the next little while, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Bakunin Brewing Company then, on to my brewery notes. So Bakunin Brewing Company, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in St. Petersburg. Petersburg as the Russians would call it, and the company was founded back in 2012, so they've been around for a little while actually. But the three men behind this brewery are Alexander Romanenko, Yuri Mitin, and Vladimir Naumkin. Alexander owns the Bakunin Cafe in St. Petersburg, which is of course named after the Russian philosopher, and that's where the brewery takes its name from. But Yuri was a keen home brewer, and then Vladimir is a professionally qualified brewer. So as it stands, Vladimir is the head brewer, while Yuri works on the logistics side of things, and Alexander manages the development side of the business. So they launched their first beer in 2013, and this was the Laughing Sam, an American Pale Ale, and this went down very well for them, and they've just kind of continued to progress from there. From the start, they started to contract their brews in Latvia, Italy, and also at home in Russia as well. But then in late 2019, they announced that they were going to build their own production facility in Jovi in northeastern Estonia, which they hope will be up and running very soon. The main idea behind doing this was the fact that they would be inside the European Union market, if you like, and I think from Estonia it's also quite easy to import stuff into Russia as well, actually. So I think that was the main thinking behind this whole setup. But in addition to the Bakunin Cafe in St. Petersburg, these guys are now also involved with the Rockets and Bishop's Bar, and also the kiosk, bottle shop and tap room, and there is another bar on the way as well, from what I understand. And as of December 2020, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 250 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, so they are a very, very prolific brewery actually, which is pretty cool. And that tends to come if you have operated as a contract or gypsy brewery, however you want to call it, over the next little while. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Bakunin Brewing Company for the moment. That was all the information I was really able to find on these guys. But yeah, I'm sure as time goes on we will be able to tell you a little bit more about what they've been up to over the next little while. I'm curious to see how their building of this facility in Jovi in Estonia turns out actually. Maybe the next time I go to Estonia I can actually go and meet the guys and do a little interview and stuff with them, or maybe I can meet them in St. Petersburg. Who knows? We'll need to see how that plays out. Russia's been on my visit list for quite a long time actually, but we do need visas to go there, which is a little bit more difficult. But Estonia is very easily, as I've shown you previously on the channel. I've done a few interviews and things in Estonia, so maybe we can make it work. But yeah, if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. So yeah, as I mentioned to you at the start of the video, this one is an 8% double IPA of some description. From what I understand, they used a Fibonacci sequence when hopping this beer. So for those of you that don't know, a Fibonacci sequence is basically one where you add the numbers that have come previously in the sequence to get the next number. So for example, it goes like 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 11, 19 and so on. It kind of goes like that. So yeah, Fibonacci sequence, you add the previous two numbers in the sequence to get the next number, and it just kind of progresses like that. So from what I understand, they used some kind of method, some kind of grams or kilogram method like that when they were actually brewing the beer. So they used the Fibonacci sequence to do the hopping in this beer, which would be quite interesting, hence the name Fibonacci. I'm not sure exactly how they did it, if they did that within the last half hour of the boil or whatever. I would guess that that's what they've done, but from what I've heard, this beer is a pretty high IBU one actually, so it should be quite interesting. I'm very curious to see whether this beer is a New England or a West Coast, or exactly what it is. All I could find out was that this is some kind of IPA. So yeah, you can check a little bit more out about that on the website, but I do know that it's hopped with Chinook, Mosaic and Centennial, so quite old school hops in this one, I have to say. But yeah, really nicely presented. I do like the kind of spiral staircase artwork that you have on this one. But this beer is in a half-litre can, and I think this cost me like, I want to say this cost me maybe 6 or 7 euros actually. So I'm not sure how that compares to the Russian price, but of course Russia doesn't have a trade deal with the European Union, so we will pay a little bit of tariffs on these, and then of course you've got the whole you know, the importer's fee and all of this kind of thing going on, as well as the fact that it's sold from a private shop and then postage and stuff. So yeah, I don't mind paying a little bit more for the Russian beers, because you do get a half-litre can rather than a 440, so you do get a little bit more beer, and then there is the kind of novelty that it is a Russian beer too. So yeah, I don't mind paying a little bit more for the Russian stuff, because it always tends to be good, and you know, it is a little bit of a novelty to be able to review these Russian beers for you. But half-litre can, this, an arithmetic double IPA, 8% ABV. I think this should be interesting. So let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'll need to keep an eye on Beer Dome in the Netherlands in the future and just see what these guys have. But like I said, I'm very curious to see what this one has in store for us. So yeah, this could be quite interesting. It actually does look a little bit more like a kind of West Coast IPA, but I think we've got about 2/3 of the beer in the glass for this one. So yeah, it does look a little bit more like a kind of West Coaster, to be honest with you, but that doesn't bother me. You guys will know, if you've watched the channel for any length of time, that I do love a good West Coast IPA. So yeah, if we shine the light through this one, it does have a wee bit more kind of haze to it. It could It could just be a sort of hybrid of both kind of ends of the spectrum, to be honest with you, but you can see it's a lovely, rich, orangey amber colour. There was about a quarter finger of a frothy, I would say kind of very lightly kind of beige, fawny coloured head on this one. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass there, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head, and the head has just faded away to be a very, very kind of thin, wispy, foamy layer. There is a little bit of a nice kind of foamy ring around the edge of the glass, one or two little spots of foam in the middle of the head there, but I mean overall it is just very, very kind of thin and very wispy actually. So yeah, it does have a nice little degree of haze to it. There is quite a bit of opacity to this one, but it's certainly not the haziest of IPAs that you're going to come across, especially in 2020. So I would surmise that this one might well be more of a West Coast IPA, but at the same time, the colour that you get out of this one and the level of haze, it might be due to a little bit of an oat or a wheat addition, so we'll just need to see. But remember, the colour of your beers depends on two things: one, the type of malts that you use, and two, the length of boil. The longer that you boil the beer, I should say, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour out of the beer. So yeah, this one does look a little bit more of a kind of rich amber colour rather than anything else, I would say. So yeah, I'm just very curious to see how this beer turns out. So let's take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one then. So yeah. Ooh, that does smell quite nice actually. I've got a feeling that this beer is going to be some kind of hybrid. I mean, from the aroma, it doesn't come across as being particularly bitter. There's not too much in the way of greenness coming out of this one, you know, pine and floral aromaticity and stuff like that. There's not too much in the way of that coming out of this beer, but it does have a considerably malty backbone to it, which I think is very nice actually. So yeah, I think that's definitely worth noting about this one for sure. Yeah, the aroma of this beer is pretty damn nice, I have to say. So yeah, let's try and break that down a little bit then. So straight away with this beer, you can feel a little bit of a white bready kind of thing coming out of this one. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of an oaty and wheaty character to this one, but you are getting various other things in there as well actually. So for me, there is a little bit of a sweet caramel to this one. It does have a wee bit of an almost West Coasty type caramel to it. You can smell a little bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuity kind of thing, but underneath that it does smell, there is, pardon me, a little bit of an almost butter candy, brown sugary sort of thing that makes me think that there's maybe a little bit of an oaty side to this beer as well. White bready base to it. I think there is a wee touch of wheat to this one maybe as well, although I think the oats, I think probably it is more of a kind of oaty character that you get out of this one rather than anything else. But yeah, the malt base does come across as being a little bit boozy, and I mean at 8% ABV, you would kind of expect that, to be honest. You would expect that a little bit from a beer such as this one. But yeah, the aroma of the malty side of this one is quite nice. It seems to have a little bit of a balance between being a more kind of caramelly, brown sugary, West Coasty type IPA, but it does have a little bit of the kind of smoothness and things that you might expect from a New England. So maybe this one is intended as being a little bit of a hybrid between the two actually, and that's not unheard of. That's definitely not unheard of actually. So yeah, I like that about this one for sure. So yeah, the aroma that comes out of the malty side of this beer is definitely quite nice. On the hoppy side of things then, so you do get a little bit of earthiness out of this one. There is a nice little bit of floral aromaticity to the beer as well. I wouldn't say that this one is overly spicy or overly resinous or whatever. Chinook normally gives you a little bit of a more kind of piney resinous character, so I can see why this beer comes across as a little bit darker in its floral aromaticity, but I don't find this beer particularly resinous. It is a little bit more kind of floral and aromatic actually. All of the hops involved in this one are, you know, 12% plus alpha acid, so you're going to get a good little bit of a floral aromatic component out of this beer regardless. But Chinook, normally dark grapefruit, pine resins. Mosaic gives you a lot of juicy kind of tangerine notes, whereas Centennial is quite a bright lemony citrus from what I gather. But like I say, all about 12% alpha acid. I think Mosaic is a little bit more at 13 or 14% if I remember rightly. All American hops of course as well. But yeah, the green side of this beer for me, little touch earthy, quite floral and aromatic, not too pungent though, right enough, and you've got just a little bit of a lighter kind of grassy element in the beer as well there, which is great. But yeah, onto the fruity side of things then, and this is where this beer does get quite interesting actually. So if you take the aroma of this beer in quite deeply, you can smell that the beer itself is really oily. I think this beer does have a good little bit of an oily component to it, which I think works very, very nicely. So there is a wee touch of a darker grapefruit in there. You will get a wee bit of a more kind of passion fruity quality as well. But I think the tangerine oranges from the mosaic really stand out in this one. This beer comes across as very oily and orangey and citrusy in that sense. It's quite an oily orange, leaning New England IPA, well not New England IPA, just a regular IPA I should say in this one. We don't know exactly what type this is yet, but it's got quite a big oily orangey component. I mean, I would say the fruity side of this beer is definitely a little bit more West Coasty rather than anything else. So yeah, the more and more that I smell of this beer, the more I get the kind of big oily tangerine orange notes out of this. You've got a little bit of the darker kind of grapefruit in the back, you've got a wee bit of a kind of oily sort of mangoey note out of this one, but on the very front of the nose you do get a little bit of that sharper lemony type citrus that you'll get from the Centennial. You can feel the Centennial just giving this beer that little extra zesty kick, to be honest with you, but definitely the fruits in this beer for me are more kind of West Coasty. So yeah, I think this is going to be a very interesting one, but there are a few things in the aroma here that point to this one being a bit of a hybrid rather than you know, being a straight up West Coaster or a straight up New Englander. So yeah, I think this one will be a really quirky beer actually. So yeah, not overly assuming in terms of its bitterness and things like that in the aroma, but it comes across as a big oily and big kind of smooth thing overall. But yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. This one is the Fibonacci, an 8% double IPA of some description from Bakunin Brewing Company based in St. Petersburg in Russia, but soon to start their production in Jovi in the northeast of Estonia. So yeah, this will be pretty cool. So let's get stuck into this one. Slanja, skål, na zdrowie, tervi sex I guess we should say as well. Cheers. Yeah. It's actually a very, very nice beer, this one. It's really very oily and very smooth. The bitterness really builds in this one the further you go into the aftertaste. You can feel that bitter kind of dry edge. Just you know, you can feel that bitter kind of dry edge just building in this beer the further that you go into it actually. I really like how this beer comes across. This is definitely one that sort of opens up a little bit. You know, the more you sit and think about it and the more you taste of it, for sure, definitely. It does seem a little bit like a hybrid though. The malt base is a little bit New Englandy, but there are some West Coasty elements in there as well actually. So this is definitely a sort of hybrid IPA in my opinion. So yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me, this one. I certainly like this. But yeah, it's definitely, the further you go into the aftertaste for this one, the more West Coasty it becomes in terms of its kind of flavour profile. But yeah, it does come across as very, very nicely, I think. So thumbs up to Bakunin for this one. This does make me quite curious about some of their other beers, so I'll need to see what other styles and stuff they've got and see if we can review some of those over the next little while. But this has certainly been a very nice introduction to Bakunin. But let's try and break down the flavour a little bit more then. Straight away with this beer you get a nice sort of pale malty quality. That just blankets the middle of your tongue. You can feel that just forming the base of the beer, and it comes across really quite smoothly. I think in the middle of your palate there, in that middle third of your tongue, you do have a nice little bit of a sweeter, it's not so sweet, but it's got a nice little bit of an oaty smoothness in there. In the very centre of your palate you do have a little bit more of a kind of brown sugary, how would you say, there's definitely a little bit of a kind of butter candy, Werther's Original type thing coming out of this one, so that's definitely nice for sure. So yeah, definitely a nice kind of butter candy, brown sugary sort of thing in there. I would say in the very centre of your palate you do get a straight up caramel, but then as you move further out from underneath that. It does have a little bit of a booziness to this beer as well, so you do get a little bit of that boozy, sweet caramel note in the very middle of your palate, and as you move further out from that, it starts to get a little bit more kind of butter candy-like, a little bit more where there's original-like, and then as you reach the very edge of the tongue, it's got a little bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing, but underneath that, you've got a very nice kind of smooth, oaty layer to the beer, and then at the very base, you've got a little bit of that kind of pale malty quality there as well. As you move towards the back of the palate then, you do still get that same smoothness. You can feel a little bit of the pale malt just forming the base on the back third of your tongue, but the back third of your tongue is distinctly more, how would we say, kind of bitey. It's got a little bit more of a, I think there is a little bit of wheat in this beer, because it does have a wee bit of a sort of wheaty bitiness there on the back third of your tongue, but as you move further forward in the beer, you can feel that the thickness of that bready note on the back third of your tongue, it does thicken up a little bit, but you do get some of that smoothness there, and there is just a little bit of bite from what I suspect is a bit of wheat. So there's something in my head that says this is very much a kind of hybrid IPA in terms of its malt base. But it does, I think it does, to be fair, I would say that it does lean a little bit more towards the West Coasty side of things. I think it might just be a West Coaster that's got a little bit of oat and a little bit of wheat in it. In fairness, I think this is maybe about 70% West Coast and about 30% New England. I think that's probably a fair assessment of where this beer lies in the IPA spectrum. But yeah, it is pretty nice, I have to say. So thumbs up once again to Bakunin on this one. But yeah, like I say, back third of your palate, as you move further forward, it does get smoother, and then the thickness just drops away as you reach that middle kind of third of your tongue, and then you get all those flavours in there that I was talking about earlier. So it does feel very, very layered in the middle third of your palate, but the back third of your palate just has a little bit more thickness and just a wee bit of bitiness to it. But yeah, in terms of the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, you do get a little bit of earthiness out of this one. That will be from both the Chinook and from the Mosaic in this one. As you move further forward along the sides of your palate there, this beer does have a good little bit of that darker piney resinous quality to it. There's a nice, the piney resinous quality actually does linger out into the aftertaste. It does have a wee bit of that brighter floral aromaticity, but I would describe this beer as being, you know, a little bit more dank, and I would describe it as being a little bit more dank and just kind of thicker and floral, to be honest with you. It does have a more of a kind of danky, piney type quality to it than it does a bright, kind of spicy floral aromaticity. So that's quite an interesting point to make about this one for sure. So yeah, this is a pretty damn interesting beer from many perspectives in that sense. I do like the presence of the Chinook in this. It's not often that you find Chinook in beers these days. It seems to have been replaced by Columbus as a bittering hop, although back in the day it was always a combination of Chinook and Columbus that you used as your bittering hop. But the further you go into the aftertaste with this one, the bitterness of the beer really does build actually. Round the front curve of the tongue, the beer is a little bit lighter and grassy, and then on the front third of your palate you've got that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just kind of roll their way out of the beer. On the back of that front third of your palate, you've got a little bit of the darker, you've got a little bit of the darker kind of grapefruity type quality there. As you move kind of further forward, that the grapefruity pungency actually does linger there quite a little bit. This, in some ways, the grapefruity presence and that dark grapefruit note really does build the kind of pungency of the beer in a lot of ways. But as you reach the front half of that front third of your palate, you get the more kind of oily, tangerine-y, orangey notes from the Mosaic in this one, and then as you reach just towards the kind of tip of your palate, you do get that big lemony, zesty type quality out of this one, and that's the Centennial. So this beer, in terms of its fruitiness, it's actually quite a bit like a kind of old school West Coast IPA. I've got a feeling that this, if I remember rightly, this could be the same kind of hoppy composition as the Pliny the Elder, although I think Pliny the Elder has a little bit of Cascade in it as well, if I remember rightly, because Cascade gives you a little bit of a lighter sort of almost figgy note in some of these West Coasty IPAs. But yeah, the fruity notes in this one are quite straightforward. A good bit of dark kind of grapefruit to this one, a little bit of a more oily, juicy tangerine, and then a kind of prominent, a kind of brighter lemony, zesty citrus on the very kind of front edge of the palate there. So I like how that goes together in this one. So yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me in that regard. The fruitiness of this one is a little bit more old school and West Coast for sure, and it's got a lovely big kind of oily quality to it as well. The malt base, as I say, it has a wee bit of that. It really, the malt base leans towards the West Coast, and I might even be tempted to revise my statement I made earlier and say that this one is 80% West Coast, 20% New England. It does have a wee bit of that oaty smoothness and a bit of wheatiness, like I said, but I don't think that's unheard of in West Coast IPAs these days. This one, if we did consider this as a West Coast IPA, it leans a little bit more towards that kind of bready end of the spectrum, such as is the case with the Russian River Pliny the Elder. It is a little bit like that. So yeah, this is quite an interesting one for sure. It is definitely more West Coast than it is New England, and that's without doubt in my mind. But yeah, it gets a big thumbs up from me, this one, and this certainly makes me very curious about some of the other offerings that Bakunin have. So yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel then, what are we going to say about this one? I think we've covered the flavour profile quite in depth now. So yeah, this one for me, top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth. The mouthfeel, from what I would describe it, I would describe this as quite an oily beer. It's certainly not the most oily one that I've come across, but it really leans towards a kind of oily and slick mouthfeel rather than anything else. The IBUs in this beer, I think, have to be at least 80. It could even be higher than that, to be honest with you. I'm not sure exactly how they've hopped this one, but I would say that this beer has at least 80 IBUs. This is quite a high bitterness IPA, this one, and that's another thing that kind of pushes it more into the West Coast IPA camp rather than the New England, to be honest with you. The malt base has a really nice little bit of smoothness and slickness to it. You've got some sweeter elements in there as well, and that helps build the kind of oiliness of the beer overall. The fruits are quite juicy, but at the same time a little bit oily, and the beer, as I say, has that nice kind of lingering bitterness that goes into the aftertaste. So I think this is definitely more of a sort of West Coast IPA rather than a New England. I think about 20% New England because of some of I think there is a wee bit of an oaty and wheaty presence in this one, but otherwise it is definitely more West Coast rather than anything. But it gets a big thumbs up from me regardless, and I've really enjoyed tasting this one in that sense. So yeah, I think that's a good place to leave this review. The other thing to point out about this is that 8%, it is actually the same percentage as Pliny the Elder, come to think of it. So yeah, that's another interesting point to make about this one. So this could this be the Russian answer to Pliny the Elder? That could be the thing. It is really, there's a lot of similarities about this one, including the way the fruits come out and including the bitterness and stuff. This beer really does remind me of Pliny the Elder in a lot of ways. So thumbs up to Bakunin for how this one's turned out. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This one is the Fibonacci, an 8% double IPA, definitely a West Coast double IPA in my opinion, from Bakunin Brewing Company, who started out as a gypsy brewer but are now going to be based in Jovi in the northeast of Estonia. So yeah, that's going to be pretty cool. But yeah, let's leave it at that then. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Bakunin as well. We will return to these guys very, very soon, I'm sure. But in the meantime, thank you for watching. Check out my social media, and I'll catch you guys later. The Fibonacci 8% West Coast Double IPA, we can say that now, West Coast Double IPA from a Bakunin Brewing Company in St. Petersburg in Russia. Slanja, Skol, cheers, Nastrovia. Check out my social media, check out Bakunin Brewing Company, and as I said earlier, have a go at some of these Russian beers if you get the chance. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.